Life has a way of bringing people together in the most unexpected moments. For Michael, a dedicated elementary school teacher with kind eyes and a gentle smile, that moment came on a chilly autumn morning at Sunshine Children's Home. He hadn't planned on having his life changed that day. Like many other volunteers, Michael simply wanted to help out at the home's weekend reading program. He walked through the familiar hallways, carrying a stack of colorful books under his arm, when a burst of laughter caught his attention. In the corner of the playroom, a small boy sat surrounded by building blocks, constructing what looked like a mini science laboratory. Despite missing his right leg, the child moved with remarkable ease, stretching and reaching for pieces with determination in his eyes. But what truly caught Michael's attention wasn't the child's physical difference. It was the way his face lit up with pure joy as he explained his creation to a younger kid sitting beside him. "And this is where we'll make the super special experiments," the boy exclaimed, carefully placing another block on top of his structure. "Just like the ones we learned about in the science book yesterday." Michael found himself drawn to the child's enthusiasm. Setting his books aside, he knelt down nearby. "That's quite an impressive laboratory you're building there," he said warmly. The boy looked up, surprised but not shy. His eyes sparkled with intelligence and curiosity. "Do you like science too?" he asked eagerly. "I teach it, actually," Michael replied, settling down on the carpet. "I'm Mr. Michael, one of the reading volunteers. Would you like to tell me more about your laboratory?" For the next hour, they talked about everything from chemistry experiments to space exploration. The boy, who introduced himself as Alex, shared his dreams of becoming a scientist who could build cool things to help people like me. He explained how he lost his leg in the car accident that took his parents 2 years ago, but he spoke about it with a remarkable maturity that touched Michael's heart. As the morning progressed, they discovered more shared interests. Both loved basketball. Alex's face glowed when Michael mentioned the Paralympics and adaptive sports programs. They both enjoyed solving puzzles, and their shared sense of humor had them laughing over silly science jokes. Something shifted in Michael that day. He had always been content with his quiet life, teaching during the week, volunteering on weekends, and spending evenings grading papers in his cozy apartment. But watching Alex's resilience, witnessing his bright spirit despite all he'd been through, awakened something deeper in Michael's heart. The connection was natural and unexpected. As Michael prepared to leave that afternoon, Alex asked innocently, "Will you come back next weekend? I want to show you my new science book." Of course, Michael promised, and he meant it with every fiber of his being. Over the next few weeks, Michael found himself looking forward to his Saturday visits more than anything else. He and Alex would read together, work on homework, or simply talk about their dreams. Sometimes they'd head to the home's small basketball court, where Alex showed impressive skill with his crutches, never letting his physical challenge dampen his competitive spirit. The staff noticed their growing bond. Mrs. Thompson, the home's director, often watched their interactions with a knowing smile. She saw how Michael's patient nature complemented Alex's energetic personality, how they brought out the best in each other. One rainy afternoon, as Michael helped Alex with his math homework, a thought that had been growing in his mind crystallized into certainty. Looking at this bright, resilient child who had already faced so much in his young life, Michael knew he wanted to be more than just a weekend visitor. He wanted to be the one to provide Alex with the loving home he deserved, to nurture his dreams and help him achieve them. The decision wasn't made lightly. Michael spent nights researching adoption procedures, reading about transracial adoption experiences, and learning everything he could about raising a child with physical differences. He knew the path ahead wouldn't be easy, but in his heart, he knew it was right. What he didn't expect was how others would react to his decision. When he first mentioned it to his colleague during lunch break, her raised eyebrows and careful, "Are you sure about this?" were just the beginning of the challenges he would face. But as Michael drove home that evening, thinking about Alex's brilliant smile and unstoppable spirit, he knew that no amount of skepticism could deter him. This was just the beginning of their story, and Michael was ready to face whatever came next, as long as it meant giving Alex the family he deserved. Little did he know that their journey together would not only change their lives, but would also transform an entire community's understanding of what makes a real family. Making life-changing decisions isn't easy, especially when those decisions challenge what others think is normal. Michael learned this lesson the hard way when he decided to tell his family about his plans to adopt Alex. He chose to break the news at his parents' weekly Sunday dinner. The familiar smell of his mom's pot roast filled the air as Michael helped set the table, his heart beating faster with each passing minute. He'd rehearsed this conversation countless times in his head, but now that the moment had arrived, the words felt stuck in his throat. "Mom, Dad," he finally said, after they'd settled into their usual spots at the dining table. "I need to tell you something important." His parents exchanged glances, probably expecting news about a promotion or maybe even a relationship announcement. Instead, Michael told them about Alex, about their connection, and about his decision to adopt. The silence that followed felt heavier than any words could have been. His father's fork stopped midway to his mouth, while his mother's hands twisted her napkin into tight knots. "But honey," she finally said, her voice shaking slightly, "have you really thought this through? Taking care of any child is a huge responsibility, and this is different." "Different how, Mom?" Michael asked quietly, though he knew exactly what she meant. His father cleared his throat. "Son, you're a single man. You've got your teaching career to think about. And this boy, well, he'll need special care, special equipment, the medical bills alone." "I've thought about all of that, Dad," Michael interrupted gently. "I've been researching for weeks. I know it won't be easy, but Alex is worth it. If you could just meet him." "And what about your future?" his mother cut in. "What if you meet someone? Not many women would be willing to take on such a complicated situation." Michael pushed his barely touched dinner aside. "My future is what I'm thinking about, Mom. And right now, I see Alex in it." The discussion continued long into the evening, with his parents raising every possible objection they could think of. Their concerns ranged from practical matters like finances to more difficult topics like the challenges of transracial adoption in their predominantly white neighborhood. Michael listened patiently, addressing each concern with the same quiet determination he'd seen in Alex's eyes when tackling difficult math problems. But his parents weren't the only ones who struggled with his decision. When Michael returned to school the next day, he decided to tell his principal, wanting to be transparent about his plans. The meeting started well enough, with Principal Chen expressing initial support, but then came the subtle warnings about community sensitivities and how some parents might have concerns. During lunch break, Michael overheard whispers in the teacher's lounge. "Can you imagine?" One colleague murmured to another. "He's barely managing his class as it is. How's he going to handle a special needs child?" The comments stung, but they also strengthened Michael's resolve. That evening, he drove to the children's home, his mind heavy with the day's conversations. But the moment he saw Alex's face light up at his arrival, all the doubts others had tried to plant in his mind melted away. Alex was working on a new science project, this time creating a simple electric circuit with materials from the home's craft supplies. "Look, Mr. Michael," he called out excitedly. "I made it work." Michael watched as Alex demonstrated his creation, explaining each component with infectious enthusiasm. This was the child others thought would be too much of a burden, this brilliant, resilient boy who saw possibilities where others saw limitations. Later that evening, Mrs. Thompson, the home's director, called Michael into her office. "I've seen a lot of potential adoptions in my years here," she said, her eyes kind but serious. "Some work out, others don't. But I've rarely seen a connection like the one you two have." She handed him a thick folder of adoption paperwork. "It won't be easy," she warned. "You'll face questions, judgment, maybe even hostility. Are you ready for that?" Michael thought about his parents' concerns, his colleagues' whispers, and the countless challenges that lay ahead. Then he thought about Alex's bright eyes and brilliant mind, about the future they could build together. "Yes," he answered firmly, taking the folder. "I've never been more ready for anything in my life." As he drove home that night, Michael's mind was already racing with plans. He'd need to adapt his house, research the best prosthetic options, find appropriate medical care, and so much more. The task seemed overwhelming when he thought about it all at once. But then he remembered something Alex had told him about solving complex math problems. "You just have to break it down into smaller pieces, Mr. Michael. Then it's not so scary anymore." Michael smiled at the memory. That's exactly what they would do, tackle each challenge one step at a time together. The road ahead might be difficult, but he knew in his heart that he was making the right choice. As he pulled into his driveway, his phone buzzed with a text from his mother. "We still think you're making a mistake, but we love you. When can we meet him?" It wasn't perfect acceptance, but it was a start. And sometimes Michael realized that's all you need, just enough space to prove that love knows no boundaries, and family is about so much more than what others expect it to be. News travels fast in small towns, and by the time Michael filed his adoption paperwork, it seemed like everyone had an opinion about his decision. The whispers that had started in the teacher's lounge spread through the community like ripples in a pond, growing larger and more distorted with each passing day. One morning, as Michael walked into the school parking lot, he noticed a piece of paper tucked under his windshield wiper. His heart sank as he read the anonymous note. "Children need a mother and a father. Think about what's best for the boy." He crumpled the paper and tossed it in the recycling bin, but the words lingered in his mind. During his morning class, he noticed several parents hovering outside his classroom door, whispering and pointing. By lunchtime, Principal Chen called him into the office again. "We've received some concerns from parents," she said, shuffling papers on her desk uncomfortably. 3 families have requested to move their children to different classes." Michael sat there, his lunch forgotten in its brown paper bag. "On what grounds?" he asked, though he already knew the answer. "They feel that your personal situation might be too distracting for the classroom environment." Principal Chen wouldn't meek his eyes. "Maybe you could delay the adoption process until the end of the school year?" Michael took a deep breath before responding. "With all due respect, my personal life doesn't affect my ability to teach. I've been working with these kids for 5 years, and my dedication to their education hasn't changed." Walking back to his classroom, Michael overheard 2 other teachers talking near the water fountain. "I heard the boy has behavioral issues," one whispered. "Can you imagine? He'll never be able to handle that alone." The rumors grew wilder with each passing day. Some people claimed Michael was only doing it for attention or to make some sort of political statement. Others suggested he couldn't possibly understand what it meant to raise a child who was both physically challenged and from a different racial background. Even at the grocery store, Michael couldn't escape the judgment. He spotted Mrs. Baker, one of his students' grandmothers, quickly turning her cart around when she saw him in the produce aisle. The same woman who had brought him cookies at Christmas was now avoiding him like he had some contagious disease. But for every person who turned away, there were small moments of support that kept him going. Like when Mr. Thompson, the school janitor, stopped him in the hallway to share that he'd been raised by a single dad and turned out just fine. Or when Ms. Rodriguez, the school librarian, quietly left a stack of books about adaptive sports and inclusive parenting on his desk. The most unexpected support came from his next-door neighbor, an elderly woman named Mrs. Chen, no relation to the principal. She caught him one evening as he was unloading supplies from his car, materials he bought to start adapting his house for Alex. "Need any help?" she asked, watching him struggle with a box of tools. Michael was surprised. Mrs. Chen had barely spoken to him in the 3 years he'd lived there. "Oh, no thank you, I've got it." "You know," she said, staying put on her porch, "my late husband was in a wheelchair. I learned a thing or two about making a house accessible." She paused, then added, "I could show you some tricks if you'd like." That weekend, Mrs. Chen helped him plan the modifications his house would need. She showed him how to measure doorways properly and suggested places where grab bars might be useful. "People will always talk," she said as they worked, "but actions speak louder than words." The following week, Michael had his first home inspection visit from the adoption agency. He'd spent days preparing, making sure everything was perfect. But just hours before the social worker was due to arrive, he found his front yard covered in cruel messages written in chalk. His heart sank, but before he could even grab a hose to wash them away, he heard voices. Looking up, he saw several of his students and their parents armed with buckets of water and scrub brushes. They had seen the vandalism on their way to school and came back to help. "We've got your back, Mr. Michael," said one of his students, already scrubbing away at the hateful words. By the time the social worker arrived, the sidewalk was clean, and there was a small group of supporters chatting on his front lawn. The social worker seemed impressed by the obvious community presence, not knowing its origins. That evening, Michael visited Alex at the children's home. As always, seeing the boy's face lit up with joy at his arrival made all the day's struggles worthwhile. "I learned something cool today," Alex said, showing Michael his science notebook. "Did you know that diamonds are just pieces of coal that got squeezed really hard? The pressure makes them stronger and more beautiful." Michael smiled, thinking how appropriate that lesson was. "That's exactly right," he said, helping Alex with his homework. "Sometimes the hardest pressure can create something amazing." As they worked together, Michael's phone buzzed with another anonymous message. But this time, he didn't even bother to read it. He was too busy watching Alex solve a complex math problem, his tongue sticking out slightly in concentration, completely unaware of the storm raging around them. Looking at this determined child who had already overcome so much, Michael knew that no amount of community backlash could make him change his mind. They would face whatever challenges came their way together, and maybe, just like those diamonds Alex talked about, the pressure would only make their bond stronger. The real challenge wasn't dealing with other people's opinions, Michael realized. It was making sure Alex would have the loving, supportive home he deserved, regardless of what anyone else thought. And that was a challenge he was more than ready to face. Moving day arrived with the first hints of spring. Michael had spent weeks preparing his home, turning the spare room that once housed old books and forgotten exercise equipment into a space perfectly suited for an energetic young boy. The walls were now painted a cheerful blue, decorated with posters of space exploration and famous scientists, Alex's heroes. The morning started early, with Michael triple-checking everything one last time. He'd installed grab bars in the bathroom, bought a special mattress recommended by Alex's physical therapist, and rearranged furniture to create wide pathways throughout the house. Mrs. Chen from next door had even helped him modify the kitchen so Alex could reach everything safely. When they arrived at the children's home, Alex was already waiting, his few belongings packed in a small suitcase and a backpack covered in rocket ship stickers. His eyes went wide when he saw the car seat Michael had specially chosen to ensure his comfort and safety during car rides. "Is this really happening?" Alex whispered as Michael helped him into the car. The question held all the hope and fear that came with such a big change. "It really is, buddy," Michael replied, making sure Alex was securely buckled in, ready for our first adventure. The drive home was filled with Alex's excited chatter about everything he saw along the way. He asked questions about the neighborhood, about where he'd catch the school bus, and whether there were any other kids nearby. But Michael noticed how tightly Alex clutched his backpack, his knuckles almost white. A reminder that beneath the excitement lay natural anxiety about such a big change. Their first challenge came right away. As they pulled into the driveway, Alex hesitated at the front steps. Michael had installed a ramp, but Alex was used to the setup at the children's home. Without missing a beat, Michael turned it into a game. "Want to help me test out our new ramp?" he asked cheerfully. "I bet it's perfect for racing toy cars down. We could do some experiments with velocity and angles. For science." Alex's face lit up at the mention of science, and soon they were planning their first official experiment as father and son. It was exactly the kind of moment Michael had hoped for, turning potential obstacles into opportunities for learning and fun. The first few days were about finding their rhythm. Michael learned that Alex was definitely not a morning person, but he came alive after his first cup of hot chocolate. They developed their own little routines. Michael would help Alex with his morning exercises while they played Guess That Element from the periodic table. Breakfast became a time for planning their day's scientific observations. One morning, as Michael helped Alex adjust his prosthetic leg, they had their first real heart-to-heart about their new situation. "Some kids at the home said it wouldn't last," Alex admitted quietly. "They said you'd change your mind once you saw how hard it is." Michael paused, making sure he had Alex's full attention. "You know what I think? I think those kids don't understand that the best things in life often take work. Like your science projects. They're not easy, but they're worth it, right?" Alex nodded slowly. "Like when my first electric circuit didn't work, but we kept trying until it did." "Exactly like that," Michael smiled. "We're going to have challenges, but we'll figure them out together. That's what families do." Their weekends became filled with what they called adaptation adventures. They'd try new ways to make daily tasks easier for Alex, turning each challenge into a problem-solving opportunity. When Alex struggled to reach the bathroom sink, they designed a step stool with special grips. When his prosthetic leg made it difficult to play certain games, they invented new ones. The kitchen became their laboratory for more than just cooking. They experimented with different ways to make tasks manageable for Alex, from reorganizing cabinets to creating a special rolling stool that let him help with dinner preparation. Each success, no matter how small, was celebrated with their secret handshake, a complicated sequence that always ended with both of them laughing. Physical therapy sessions could have been daunting, but Michael found ways to make them fun. He turned exercises into dance moves, playing Alex's favorite songs while they worked on his balance and strength. Soon, their living room dance parties became a daily tradition, with both of them inventing increasingly silly moves. One evening, after a particularly challenging therapy session, Alex was frustrated with his progress. Michael found him sitting on his bed, staring at his prosthetic leg. "I'll never be like other kids," he said, his voice thick with emotion. Michael sat beside him. "You're right, you won't be like other kids," he said, causing Alex to look up in surprise. "You'll be better. Because you know something they don't." "What's that?" "You know that being different isn't a weakness, it's a superpower. It means you see the world in ways others don't, and you can solve problems they've never even thought about. That makes you special, not less." Their conversation was interrupted by a knock at the door. It was Mrs. Chen, carrying a plate of freshly baked cookies. "I thought our young scientist might need some brain fuel," she said with a wink. "I heard you two working on those physical therapy moves earlier. Quite the dance party." As they shared cookies with their neighbor, Michael watched Alex explain his latest science project to Mrs. Chen, complete with elaborate hand gestures and sound effects. This was their new normal, not always easy, but filled with more joy than he could have imagined. Later that night, as Michael tucked Alex into bed, the boy asked sleepily, "Aren't you happy you picked me?" Michael felt his heart swell. "Picking you was the best decision I ever made. And you know what? I think you picked me too." As he turned off the light, leaving the glow-in-the-dark stars they'd stuck on the ceiling to shine, Michael realized that they were doing more than just adapting to their new life together. They were creating something entirely new. A family defined not by what they couldn't do, but by all the amazing things they could accomplish together. The moment that changed everything came on a regular Tuesday afternoon. Michael was grading papers while Alex did his homework at the kitchen table, their usual after-school routine. Suddenly, Alex looked up from his science textbook with that spark in his eyes that Michael had come to recognize as his big idea look. "Dad," he said, and Michael's heart skipped a beat. It was the first time Alex had called him that. "I want to try out for the track team." Michael carefully set down his red marking pen, giving Alex his full attention. They'd been working with a physical therapist for months on mastering his new prosthetic leg, but competitive sports, that was a whole new challenge. "Tell me more about what you're thinking," Michael said, moving to sit beside him. Alex pulled out his tablet, showing Michael videos he'd been watching of Paralympic athletes. "Look at what they can do. And my physical therapist said I'm getting really good with my new leg. I know it won't be easy, but..." He paused, biting his lip. "I want to try." That weekend, they visited a specialty sports clinic that worked with young athletes with prosthetic limbs. The professional there, Coach Tom, watched Alex move and broke into a wide smile. "You've got natural athlete written all over you, kid," he said, making Alex beam with pride. They learned that Alex would need a special running blade for track events. When Michael saw the price, his heart sank. It was way beyond what he budgeted for. But before he could say anything, Alex spoke up. "Maybe we could do a science fair project about prosthetic design? To learn more while we save up." That was Alex, always turning challenges into opportunities to learn. Over the next few months, they worked together on the project, researching different prosthetic designs and the physics behind them. Alex's enthusiasm was contagious, and soon his project caught the attention of his science teacher. "This is remarkable work," the teacher said during the school science fair, where Alex's presentation drew quite a crowd. "You've taken something personal and turned it into a learning opportunity for everyone." The local newspaper even did a small story about Alex's project. When the article came out, something unexpected happened. The community, which had once been so quick to judge their unusual family, started to see Alex differently. He wasn't just the disabled kid or that teacher's adopted son anymore. He was a bright young scientist with big dreams. A local prosthetics company read about Alex's project and reached out. They offered to sponsor him with a custom-made running blade. The day they went to pick it up, Alex could hardly contain his excitement. "This is like getting a superpower," he exclaimed, watching the technician make final adjustments to his new running blade. Michael noticed how the technician smiled at Alex's enthusiasm, taking extra time to explain how everything worked. The first few practice sessions were tough. Alex fell, a lot, but each time he hit the ground, he got back up with even more determination. Michael watched from the sidelines, his heart in his throat every time Alex stumbled, but he knew better than to rush in. His son needed to do this on his own. "You know what's cool about falling?" Alex said one evening as they put ice on his bruised knee. "It's teaching me about impact forces and momentum. Everything's science, right, Dad?" Michael laughed, amazed at how his son could turn even his struggles into learning opportunities. "Everything's science," he agreed, "including your incredible persistence." As Alex grew more confident with his running blade, he started joining the school track team's practice sessions. The coach, who had initially seemed uncertain about having Alex on the team, was won over by his dedication. Some of the other kids were curious about his prosthetic leg, and Alex took it as a chance to educate them, giving mini science lessons about how it worked. One day, during practice, something magical happened. Alex was doing sprints, and for the first time, everything clicked. His stride found its rhythm, the running blade working in perfect harmony with his body. He flew down the track faster than he'd ever gone before. The whole team stopped to watch. When Alex finished his run, breathing hard but grinning from ear to ear, his teammates burst into applause. The same kids who had once stared at him in the hallways were now crowding around, asking him to teach them about his cool robot leg. That evening, as they drove home, Alex was unusually quiet. "Everything okay, buddy?" Michael asked, glancing at him in the rearview mirror. "Better than okay," Alex replied, his voice thoughtful. "Today was the first time I felt like just another kid on the team. Not the kid with one leg or the adopted kid, just me." Michael had to blink back tears. "You've always been just you to me," he said softly. "I know, Dad," Alex smiled. "That's why you're the best dad ever." Later that night, after Alex had gone to bed, Michael found a note slipped under his door. It was from Mrs. Chen next door. "I saw Alex running today from my window. That boy of yours is going to change the world someday. You already have." Looking at the note, Michael thought about how far they'd come. The same community that had once whispered and pointed was now cheering Alex on. His son wasn't just adapting to his new life. He was thriving, showing everyone that being different didn't mean being limited. But more than that, Alex was teaching everyone around him valuable lessons about persistence, creativity, and the power of looking at challenges as opportunities. He wasn't just breaking down physical barriers, he was changing minds and opening hearts. The upcoming track meet would be Alex's first real competition, but in many ways, he had already won his biggest race, the race to find his place in the world, to show that family isn't about matching appearances, and that limitations only exist if you let them. The morning of the State Paralympic Junior Championships dawned bright and clear. Michael found Alex already awake, sitting on his bed, carefully polishing his running blade. The same running blade that just months ago had seemed like an impossible dream. "Couldn't sleep?" Michael asked, sitting beside him. "Just making sure everything's perfect," Alex replied, his voice a mix of excitement and nerves. "Did you pack my lucky science notebook?" "Right next to your water bottle," Michael assured him. "Though you know what your physical therapist says, it's not luck, it's all the hard work you've put in." The drive to the state sports complex was filled with Alex's usual chatter about scientific facts, his way of dealing with nerves. "Did you know that when running, the force on your legs can be up to 3 times your body weight? That's why the spring mechanism in my blade is so important." Michael smiled, remembering how different this drive felt from their first car ride together as father and son. Back then, they were 2 nervous strangers starting a new journey. Now, they were a team. As they pulled into the parking lot, both were surprised by what they saw. A group of people was waiting with handmade signs. Alex's teammates from school, their parents, his teachers, and even Mrs. Chen, who had insisted on coming despite her bad hip. One sign read, "Our science star can run like lightning." Another said, "Physics plus determination equals victory." "Look at that," Alex whispered, his eyes wide. "They'd all came to watch me." "They all came to support you," Michael corrected gently. "Big difference." The registration area was buzzing with activity. Young athletes with various prosthetics and their families filled the space, creating an atmosphere of excitement and acceptance. Alex looked around in amazement. For the first time, he wasn't the only kid with a prosthetic leg. Here, he was just another athlete preparing to compete. During warm-ups, Alex met other kids his age who shared similar stories. There was a girl who lost her leg to cancer but went on to become a gymnast. A boy who was born with one leg and dreamed of competing in the Paralympics. They swapped tips about prosthetics and training methods, speaking their own special language of determination and adaptation. "Dad," Alex called out between stretches, "did you know Tom over there has a prosthetic that can switch between running and swimming modes? The engineering is incredible." The preliminary heats began, and Alex's nervousness returned. Michael watched as his son paced back and forth, muttering scientific formulas under his breath, his unique way of staying calm. When it was finally his turn to line up for his heat, Alex looked over at the stands. His entire support system was there, holding their breath. The starting gun fired, and Alex was off. Michael had seen his son run many times during practice, but this was different. There was a focus, a determination in his stride that he'd never seen before. The running blade that had once seemed so foreign was now a natural extension of his body. Alex finished second in his heat, qualifying for the finals. The crowd in the stands erupted in cheers, but Michael's eyes were fixed on his son's face. The pure joy radiating from his smile was worth every challenge they'd faced. Between heats, Alex's school friends crowded around him, asking questions about the competition and his running blade. Michael overheard him explaining the physics of prosthetic running to his fascinated audience, complete with hand gestures and scientific terms. Even here, in the middle of an athletic competition, his son was teaching others. The finals were intense. Alex was up against more experienced runners, kids who had been training with their prosthetics for years. As they lined up for the start, Michael held his breath. Next to him, Mrs. Chen clutched her "Go Alex" sign tightly. When the gun went off, the race was too close to call. The runners were neck and neck, their running blades flashing in the sunlight. Alex was giving it everything he had, his face set in concentration. In the final stretch, he pulled ahead slightly, then fell back, then surged forward again. He crossed the finish line in second place, just a fraction of a second behind the winner. The crowd went wild. Michael wasn't sure who was cheering louder. Alex's school friends, or the other athletes' families who had adopted him as one of their own. As Alex received his silver medal, Michael saw tears in his son's eyes. But they weren't tears of disappointment, they were tears of joy, of accomplishment, of belonging. The boy who had once been worried about being different was now standing on a podium, proudly showing the world what different could achieve. After the ceremony, a small boy using crutches approached Alex. "Can you tell me about your running blade?" he asked shyly. "I want to run too." Michael watched as his son's face lit up. Alex took off his medal and placed it around the younger boy's neck. "Try it on," he said kindly, "and let me tell you about the amazing science that makes it work." On the drive home, Alex was unusually quiet, just looking at his silver medal with a thoughtful expression. "You know what, Dad?" he finally said. "I used to think being different was the worst thing that could happen to me. But now I know it's not about being different or the same, it's about being yourself." Michael reached over and squeezed his son's shoulder. "That's what makes you a champion, buddy. Not the medal, though that's pretty awesome too." As they pulled into their driveway, they found their front yard decorated with balloons and a big congratulations banner. The neighbors had organized a small celebration. Mrs. Chen was there with her famous cookies, and Alex's teammates were ready with more questions about the competition. Standing in their yard, watching Alex demonstrate his running technique to his friends while explaining the physics involved, Michael felt overwhelmed with pride. His son hadn't just won a medal today, he'd shown an entire community what was possible when you looked past differences and focused on potential. Someone had once asked Michael if adopting Alex was worth all the challenges they'd faced. Looking at his son now, confident, happy, and inspiring others, he knew there was only one possible answer. Some of life's greatest victories don't come with medals, but with the knowledge that you've helped someone else find their way to shine. 3 years had passed since that silver medal moment, and life had changed in ways neither Michael nor Alex could have imagined. They sat together in the auditorium of their local community center, watching people file in for the annual Adoption Awareness event. This time, they weren't just attendees, they were the keynote speakers. Alex, now a confident teenager, adjusted his tie nervously. "Do you think anyone will really want to hear our story, Dad?" Michael smiled, remembering the shy boy who had once asked similar questions about joining the track team. "Look around, buddy, they're already listening." He was right. The auditorium was packed with families, social workers, teachers, and community members. Some faces were familiar. Mrs. Chen sat in the front row, beaming proudly. Others were new, drawn by the story of a single teacher who had defied expectations to create an extraordinary family. As they waited to be introduced, Michael reflected on their journey. That first year had been full of challenges, but it had also laid the foundation for something amazing. Alex's success in sports had been just the beginning. His passion for science and helping others had grown into something much bigger. The science fair project about prosthetics had evolved into a weekly club at their local community center, where Alex helped other kids with physical challenges explore the science behind adaptive equipment. He called it the Different Engineers Club, a place where being different was seen as an advantage in problem solving. And now, the event organizer announced, "Please welcome our speakers, Michael and Alex Thompson, who will share their story about how love knows no boundaries." As they walked to the podium together, Michael noticed something remarkable. The same community that had once whispered behind their backs was now leaned forward in their seats, eager to hear what they had to say. Alex's running blade clicked softly against the stage floor, a sound that had once drawn stares but now represented triumph over adversity. Alex spoke first, his voice clear and confident. 3 years ago, I was a kid who thought being different meant being alone. I had lost my birth parents, lost my leg, and thought I'd lost my chance at a normal life. He paused, looking at Michael. Then I met someone who showed me that normal is overrated. The audience laughed warmly, and Alex continued, sharing stories about their early days together. He talked about turning physical therapy into dance parties, about making science experiments out of everyday challenges, and about learning that family isn't about matching appearances, it's about matching hearts. Michael then stepped forward to share his perspective. He talked about the anonymous notes left on his car, the parents who had wanted to remove their children from his class, the whispered doubts about his ability to be a single father. But he also talked about the unexpected allies they'd found along the way. Mrs. Chen with her practical wisdom, the track coach who had given Alex a chance, the prosthetics company that had believed in a young boy's dreams. "The funny thing about prejudice," Michael said, "is that it can't survive exposure to love. When people saw how much Alex and I cared for each other, how well we fit together despite our differences, those whispers turned into words of support." As they spoke, photos appeared on the screen behind them. Alex winning his first track meet, father and son conducting science experiments in their kitchen, both of them covered in paint while decorating Alex's room. Each image told a story of love overcoming obstacles, but the real change, Alex added, happened when we stopped trying to prove anything to anyone else. We were just a family, doing what families do, supporting each other, learning from each other, and growing together. They shared how their story had inspired others in unexpected ways. 3 other families in their community had since adopted children with physical challenges. The school had started an adaptive sports program, with Alex serving as a peer mentor. Even their local government had improved accessibility in public spaces after seeing the challenges Alex faced. "The best part," Alex said, grinning at his father, "is that my dad and I have helped change how people see adoption and disability. But you know what? We didn't do it by trying to change anyone's mind. We did it by being ourselves and letting others see that different can be wonderful." During the question and answer session, a single mother stood up. "I've been hesitating about adopting a child with special needs," she admitted. "I'm scared I won't be enough." Alex leaned into the microphone before Michael could respond. My dad wasn't enough when he started either, he said, causing chuckles throughout the room. But he learned, and I learned, and we figured it out together. That's what makes it special. As the event drew to a close, people lined up to talk with them. There were other adoptive families seeking advice, teachers wanting to make their classrooms more inclusive, and kids with prosthetics who saw Alex as their hero. A small boy with crutches approached them last. "I remembered you," Alex said warmly. "You were at my first championship." The boy nodded, pulling out a familiar silver medal from his pocket. The same one Alex had let him try on 3 years ago. "You told me about the science of running blades that day," the boy said shyly. "Now I'm getting my own next month. Will you help me learn to use it?" Alex's face lit up with the same enthusiasm he had for every new scientific challenge. "Of course. We can start with the physics of momentum and stride length." Later that night, as they drove home, Michael glanced at his son. "You know, when I first decided to adopt you, people said I was going to change your life. They didn't realize you'd change mine too, and so many others." Alex smiled, fiddling with his tie. "We're just getting started, Dad. There are still so many people who need to know that being different isn't a weakness, it's a superpower." As they pulled into their driveway, Mrs. Chen was waiting with her usual plate of cookies. "My heroes need a snack after all that inspiring speech-making," she said with a wink. Sitting in their kitchen, sharing cookies with their neighbor, Michael looked at the boy who had become his son, the student who had become his teacher, and felt overwhelming gratitude. Their story wasn't just about adoption or overcoming physical challenges. It was about the power of love to transform not just 2 lives, but an entire community. Sometimes the biggest changes start with the smallest decisions, guided by nothing more than the hope in your heart that love can build bridges across any divide. Michael and Alex had built such a bridge, and now others were crossing it, finding their own paths to understanding, acceptance, and joy.